Decoding Learning Differences with Kimberly Lavelle, and this episode is Checking Progress. So at this point in the year, we're about a third of the way through the year, maybe a fourth, maybe closer to half, depending on where you're at. So, but when's the last time you checked in on real progress for your kiddo? How much do you know about your child's actual progress toward their IEP goals and just toward kind of your more informal goals and expectations in their academics in general? So I just want to kind of give this as a little nudge to go make sure you're actually checking. If your child is on an IEP, you should be expecting to get progress reports with around the same time as a report card. Generally, some schools do it a little differently, but if you haven't heard from the school in a while, you don't know how they're doing on goals, ask. I've been seeing a trend lately that I'm not understanding and I haven't gotten behind, so if you have insight, let me know, where schools aren't putting short-term objectives with the IEP goals and aren't sending progress reports. So you find out once a year if the child met the IEP goal. The point of the short-term objectives is to break down the goal, for one thing, but also to make sure that the child is making appropriate progress and then determine, do we need to adjust the goal? Do we need to adjust the services? Do we need to adjust accommodations? So we want to always be checking progress to see what changes to their education are necessary so they're not just wasting their time. It's a huge waste of time if, let's say, their IEP is in March. So back in March, you came together as a team, you wrote an annual IEP all together, you agreed on all the goals and services and accommodations and all the things, and it was beautiful, or as beautiful as it's going to be, because they're never perfect, right? So you sign off on it. Okay, next March you meet and they're going over the goals and they're like, okay, yeah, they met all their goals, and they're suggesting new goals. And then you're looking at the goals, you're like, well, my kid can already do those things too. And then how much time have you been, and you realize your kid has been working on goals that they knew that they had met back in May last year, and yet they've still been getting pulled out of class 2 hours a day. And they're not really that wasn't necessarily the best use of their time. Necessarily, maybe it was. Maybe they kept moving forward. But there's different things there, right? And of course, the opposite type of thing. You get to the next meeting a year later, it's March, you're looking at the goals, they didn't meet any of their goals. And then you're like, well, what are we going to do about it? And they're like, well, we'll change the goals and we'll try, we'll adjust the services. And you just wasted a year of my kid's life. They're at such a critical age for accessing that information. A year lost in their education is huge. It is detrimental. It's a big problem. Enough that I get heated thinking about it, and I'm trying to consciously relax myself a little bit. So yeah, no, that's not okay. You can't go a full year before you find out that your kid didn't make any progress on the goals because the instruction was not a good match, or the timing was bad, or there weren't sufficient accommodations, or the goal was just really poorly written, or was way too advanced, and there really was some other underlying issues that needed to get addressed first before the goals could get made. But if they aren't working on those underlying issues and they're just pursuing a really challenging goal, you don't always make progress. Let me give an example to make this more understandable, because that's a confusing sentence to say vaguely, right? For example, I might have a third grade kid, and the goal says that they will read a third grade text by next year. So they're going to be in fourth grade next year, but the expectation is they'll read a third grade text at 90% accuracy, 90 correct words per minute. This is not the kind of goal that I recommend, but I'm just saying that's the goal that was written, right? So I'm looking at this goal. And the baseline, the reason that they're saying this is that the kid was able to read 15 correct words per minute at a first grade level. So that's huge growth that they're expecting, right? That's really huge growth. But the reason that they were reading only 15 correct words per minute is because they don't really know how to read much. They have very basic, they've got a few sight words, they kind of know some phonics, but not even the whole, a single sound for every single letter. Like they're weak in a lot of basic skills that really actually need to be worked on. So a year from now, all they've been handing the kid is different passages to read and practice, read and practice, read and practice, and not actually teaching them the phonics that they need to know in order to access decoding new words. They've not been teaching them strategies for like they're not really working on those foundational skills that were the reason they struggled with their fluency, quote, before. The real issue was always that they didn't really know how to read yet. They didn't have a strong reading foundation in terms of decoding what they're reading. And then applying those and orthographic mapping that then develops from a strong foundation in phonics and a lot of practice and fluency and stuff. All of that kind of comes together. You need to understand why a child is at a certain level when you're looking at why is that a concern? What underlying skills are they missing that we're actually writing a goal for? And if you're not noticing along the way, you can waste a child's entire year working on something that they cannot achieve. Another example that I've seen not too long ago was with writing. There was a kid that kept writing these goals. The school kept writing these goals that the kid would write these 5-paragraph essays, and it would include all of this and include all of that, and then they would say the kid met the goal. But when you really looked at what the kid could produce on their own, they couldn't even write a sentence that was above like a first grade level sentence. It had like 6 words in it. It was very, very basic. They couldn't go beyond that. They didn't know how. They didn't have that foundational understanding. So yes, you could look at this 5-paragraph essay that they had produced, but they had added into the goal that it was with support, with help. So the kid wasn't actually learning how to write these 5-paragraph essays. They were just being walked through it and handheld and step by step and then edited. And even then what you're reading is very basic sentences that they've put together in this overall 5-paragraph essay structure, but it's not, the kid was in 6th grade. Like it was not age appropriate. It wasn't grade appropriate. And he was advanced in other ways and could have made progress. But year after year, they kept using like current grade level standards. And that is important to an extent in a way, but you have to be careful how you do it. So his time was being wasted, is what I'm saying. He wasn't making writing progress because the goal was not appropriately written. So we have to make sure that we are checking in on our kids' progress and making sure that the goals are appropriate and accommodations. It's not just the progress on goals. We also are looking in the classroom. How are they doing on the thing? They don't have a goal in math, let's say. They don't have a goal in math. So then you're expecting that they are accessing the math curriculum. Check in with the teacher, not just looking at the report card, because sometimes report cards lie. I've had multiple teachers I've had to go to and talk to back when I was in the classroom, and I'd be like, you have to tell the truth. Like, I know this kid can't do that. You can't say that they can do it on the report card. They're like, well, I was told that kids on IEPs have to always have passing grades. Like, but if they can't do the thing, you can't say that they can do the thing, because I have to be able to say they can't do the thing so then I can write goals. So that I can write goals for math, that they actually need help, so that I can then give them services so they can get the help so that they aren't falling behind, because you lying on the report card is not helping them. But they were afraid of getting in trouble for saying that the kid was actually struggling when the kid was actually struggling. So we have to be careful that we are giving kids what they need and being honest. So talk to the teacher. If everything looks good on the report card, what is the work that's coming home? Does that line up? And really briefly, because I know that there are quite a few people that listen to this podcast that are homeschoolers, like myself. This is still applicable, right? You're thinking about, is my child making the progress I expect them to make? What can I do differently? So that's also part of it. The other part that I started to say and then distracted myself was if the accommodations are appropriate. And part of that is, okay, the kid's working on writing, they're in the classroom. One of their accommodations is speech to text. They can use voice typing on the computer, right? So they don't have to physically type it all out. They can use voice typing. They need to edit it. You're checking on, like, are you using that at school? What does that look like? Does that work for you? Do you like it? And a lot of times kids are like, no, I'm not going to use it at school because then everyone hears what I'm saying. Okay, well, would you want to do it somewhere quiet? Do you want to be able to just work on writing at home? And when other people are working on writing at school, you're doing your math homework. Something like that, right? Like, talk to your kids and see how it's working for them and their perspective, but then also talk to the teachers. Like, hey, how is it working for my kiddo to be using that speech to text in the classroom? Oh, they're not using it. Why is that? Oh, they don't want to. I wonder why they don't want to. Have you talked, what I'm hearing is this. Can we do this instead? Would this work? Have those conversations. Make sure that the accommodations that are on the IEP are being implemented. That's also part of this check that you're doing. And that what's being implemented makes sense. And is there something else needed? If your kid's coming home, and let's say the same kid, right? They don't, or maybe it's a different kid actually, because let's say they're doing great in math. They're so good at math. It's like mind-blowing. Like their math, they understand instantly. They can do all the math instantly. Reading is a whole different story. They're really struggling with reading. But then they're spending an hour and a half every evening doing these huge math assignments because in class, when they have time to work on it, they're so distracted by all the kids and all the noise or their neighbor talking to them and the other assignments, and their teacher giving new instruction, and they aren't able to do much at all at school. So then they're coming home and they're spending an hour and a half every night on math homework. Well, that might not be a good use of their time because they don't need an hour and a half of practice on something that they're actually really good at. They can do a very small amount of it, show their mastery, and spend a lot more time focusing on practicing reading or even just relaxing their brain sometimes, right? Getting physical, going out and playing sports, whatever it is, all of that helps with brain development. All of that helps them be more successful. So we have to make sure that no one is wasting our kids' times, basically. Like, we don't want their time being wasted. We want it to be productive. If they are doing an assignment, there needs to be a purpose for them to be spending that time on that assignment. I hope that gives you a lot to think about, a lot to check on with your kiddos. If you want some more intensive support, always feel free to email me, Kimberlyn@decodinglearningdifferences.com. We can look at your child's current IEP. We can look through what kinds of questions you want to be asking to see what that progress should be looking like, to make sure that all of the current goals, accommodation, services are appropriate. Maybe they need more time, maybe they need less time with services. I didn't talk about that too much. So think about all of that. If you want any help, always reach out to me. If you have a quick question, please reach out to me. If you have a story, I love hearing stories. Email me, Kimberlyn@decodinglearningdifferences.com. And I will talk to you again next week.